Why do we only read books by men? And why do we not watch foreign films? That is the topic of today's Life on Books podcast. I'm your host, Tony. With me, as always, is Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead.
Good morning, Tony.
That was going to be the intro, kind of, for last week's episode, but I ended up trimming it out because what I found was that the internet is very sensitive, and you can't make a joke because people aren't going to stick around for the punchline. So today we're going to be answering all of your questions for us about books, which is just foolish because we're idiots. So
I had a great laugh at the reel you posted about books that should be made into movies. I don't understand like why people took that so seriously.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I have previously done a video about books that I think would make great movies. And then our friend Nick at Books Are Sick made a post like that. And I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll do like another one of those. And I was sitting there thinking about it. And I was like, well, I don't really have too much to say about this.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll just make a joke video. And I was like, I'll just pull out, 5 random books. And a lot of my videos, I'll not necessarily script word for word, but I'll kind of give myself bullet points.
Yeah.
But for that one, I didn't. I was just like, I'll just say the most ridiculous thing that comes to mind while I'm talking about the book. And so the first one I had in my hands was the Count of Monte Cristo. And I really tried my hardest to make it so obvious that this was not a real opinion. Because, as you know, and many of our listeners may know, the 5 books I would avoid you video was taken way too seriously. In fact, I still get comments. Someone just commented yesterday and said, there's also a stereotype about people that hate these books, and you fit it perfectly. And I'm like, okay, cool, man. So anyway, I really tried very hard to just be as absurd as possible. And I did go in kind of like an order of books that have been turned into movies that it started with something like, you might not know that Last of the Mohicans was a movie. It had Daniel Day-Lewis, and I think it was quite popular when it came out in like 1992 or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you're maybe on the younger side, you might not have seen that movie. And the copy of The Road that I have even has the emblem on it that says like turn into a major motion picture or whatever. And Jaws and Jurassic Park are arguably two of the most popular films of all time.
Right.
Certainly very influential films. And no, people commented, I don't know if you know this, dude, but Jurassic Park is already been turned into a movie. And I'm like, oh boy. Okay.
Yeah, I remember watching it because you led with the Count of Monte Cristo.
Yeah, and I just thought of that on the fly. I was like, what's something ridiculous I could say about this?
Yeah, and I was like, I didn't realize that was, and I didn't know, I guess, or I'd forgotten that had been made into a film. It's in French, right? It's not.
Well, so there's a few iterations of it. I don't know if there was a foreign film previously, but there is a new French film that was just released last year, I believe, and it looks incredible. And there was also an American version of it already in the late 90s or early 2000s with Gerard Depardieu.
Yeah.
Which I didn't think was great. Some people liked it, but I think generally it wasn't well received.
But I saw that and I was like, okay. I didn't know. I couldn't remember if that one had been made or not. So I was like, okay, yeah, that could probably be a good movie. And then I saw he did Last of the Mohicans, and I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure this has been made into a movie.
Yeah.
But like maybe Tony just forgot. And then I think The Road was third. And I was like, oh, okay. He's just being an ass.
Yeah. And so I just kind of flippantly said like, oh, I don't watch foreign films, which if you don't know me, you've never seen my content before, and you are just seeing that for the first time, I could understand being a little triggered by it, I guess.
Yeah.
But what was interesting to me was there are people that I for sure have interacted with, and I'm like 99% confident that they were longtime followers being like, terrible take, unfollow. And I'm like, I've literally been posting every single day this month about works in translation. You really think I wouldn't watch a foreign film? Like,
it's funny you say that because I put out something on my story yesterday looking for a movie recommendation, and I got a lot of good suggestions, and then someone sent me a message trying to get a little bit more like, oh, what are you looking for? Like, what kind of stuff do you like? Not like, whatever. And one of the questions he asked me was like, are you okay with subtitles? Meaning, are you okay with something, not in English?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not against it, but I would prefer something in English tonight. Like, I'm just not in the mood for a foreign film tonight.
Yeah. I mean, I would absolutely prefer to read subtitles over dubs. I don't like dubs at all. But one thing that is challenging about film in particular with subtitles is you spend a lot of time reading the subtitles, and so you can miss some of the visuals.
Yeah.
So I find that I usually will have to watch films with subtitles multiple times, which is fine. Actually, one of my favorite movies is a foreign film. It's Harakiri. It came out in the 60s. It's a Japanese film. Absolutely brilliant story. So creative and clever, and the camera work is incredible. It's black and white, all in Japanese, but it's like probably a top 5 film of all time for me. But I digress. Today we are taking some user, as I've mentioned, we're taking your questions and answering them. And the intro was a joke, but if you were offended by it, you're not listening at this point, because people don't sit through a 30-second video, never mind a 5-minute intro to a podcast. But let's start with our reading recap and update. What have you been reading, Andy?
So I finished Case of Gem, which was really good. I think I told you I felt like the ending was a little rushed.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily dislike it, but a lot of the bulk of the novel, like I think I talked about last time, was a lot of this political intrigue and precise strategizing by all the players, and just a lot of kind of setup, kind of making their plans. And then it felt like the ending was just like, okay, and then here's what happened. So it was a great novel. I wish it was a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So the ending could have been a little bit more detailed.
I believe it was Jane Austen who said all good novels are too short, or something to that effect. Caleb, look that up and put it on the screen, please, sir. Thank you.
But yeah, it was a good novel. Just wish it could have been a little bit longer. Been reading some more of The Dying Grass. Really enjoying that. I need to make time this week to really dig into that, so I can put a more of a significant dent in it.
Yeah, because it's 1,000 pages, right?
Yeah, a little bit more than that. Yeah.
Nice.
And let's see. I've been reading The Taker and Other Stories by Rubem Fonseca, who's a Portuguese author. I got the book from Open Letter.
Nice.
Someone in the comments of one of the reels you posted recommended him to us. He was actually, I believe, friends, or at least had some correspondence with our good friend Thomas Pynchon.
Oh, we are 10 minutes in, and the first Thomas Pynchon reference has been dropped. In fact, speaking of joking around, we have a seriously missed opportunity last week when we did our favorite works in translation by women, because we probably should have made up a fictional woman version of Thomas Pynchon. It could be like Tanya Pinchonsta or something like that. She's
Rugalina.
Rugalina. She's a new on the scene from Latin America or something. I don't know. That would have been funny.
But yeah, it's some of the stories in there are bonkers. I'm usually hit or miss with short stories.
Yeah.
But some of them in there have been really great. And then last up, I read Miracle Boy by Jack Moody.
Yep.
Which was from Anxiety Press, the same publisher as The Garden by Aidan Scott. And I really enjoyed that. I was a little bit skeptical going in, and took me about 10, 20, maybe 30 pages to get over this skepticism. But it's more or less about like this guy kind of going through like an alcohol-induced psychosis, just a total boost bag, so to speak, kind of dealing with the ramifications of not really eating or doing anything productive with your life other than drinking and more drinking. And I feel like anytime I read about a book like that or go into a book like that, I get worried that it's just going to be this self-proclaimed tortured artist writing about trying to overcome his demons that are all problems he created for himself.
Yeah.
And just, that writer or character trying to sound cool and edgy. Like, look at me, I drink so much. My life is so terrible. And, and like I said, it took me a little bit to get over that skepticism. But Moody really does a great job pushing against that trope or I guess vibe, so to speak, and turning it on its head and making it more of a absurdist and surrealist look at that kind of novel.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot more to it than that. So, but it was really well written. Definitely a lot of dark humor, but a short read. I think I'll go back, and it only took me about a couple hours. So I think I'll go back and make some time to read it a second time and kind of have a new approach now that I am confident it's not, going to be that just an author trying to sound cool and edgy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Cool.
But that's all I got.
Sweet. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to report on. I read.
Well, actually, I forgot.
Oh.
I've also been rereading Borges. I brought the collected fictions to work with me. So I just been reading a story or two on my lunch break.
Nice.
Just chipping away at that. And it's great stuff. Borges is awesome.
Can't go wrong with Borges. So I read last week, we had talked about 5 books that we are looking forward to read from women in translation. One of them on my list was Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. And so I read that this week and did not like it. It had some redeeming qualities. There were some great passages and great quotes in it, I think, stuff that I flagged and we'll probably go back to. But in general, as an overall book, I was kind of like disappointed, I guess. It's a murder mystery. I guessed the plot twist probably in the first 5 to 10 pages. You could probably make the case that that's not really the point of the book and there's deeper themes, which I think that people might look at a genre like a murder mystery or a detective novel or maybe even a Western or some of these other very defined genres and think that they can't be very literary. And I don't think that's true. I do think that you can have a great writing and deeper meaning themes in these kind of more defined mediums, but it just didn't have the bite for that, I don't think. There was some stuff there that you could kind of see what she was hinting at, but I just felt like it was kind of okay, all right. Super easy read, very quick read, and just there's something about a murder mystery that it doesn't matter how good or bad it is. Once you kind of stage that, like, I want to see if I'm right or not,
right,
you will continue to read it unless it's absolutely atrocious writing. And the writing's not bad.
Yeah.
I just thought it was unbelievably predictable and kind of surprising because she's a Nobel Prize winner. She's been kind of considered this literary giant from Poland. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know. This is one of her more popular books.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit skeptical of some of her other work. Also, this is completely unrelated, but the photo of her on the back of the book, I don't know when it was taken, but she looks like she's 30 years old on the photo at the back of the book. She's like in her 60s.
Weird.
And she also looks like kind of like a character from The Fifth Element. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
No, I don't think so.
That is a great film. You want to talk about movies you should watch. The Fifth Element, it's a sci-fi, came out in the 90s, I think. It's got like Chris Tucker in it. It's hilarious. It's a very bizarre and unique movie. But anyway, so I read that, and I've just been chipping away at Che by John Lee Anderson and The 40 Days of Musa Dog by Franz Werfel, which is great. Both of those books are great.
Nice. I will say I haven't read any Tokarczuk myself, but I had talked to a couple people. I believe someone was reading Flights.
Yeah.
I was talking to him on Instagram. And Bookstagram is kind of funny. Like I saw one person, I forget what book he was starting of hers. It might have been her newest one out, The Emporium, I think it's called.
Yeah, that actually does look interesting to me.
And he was like, I'm 0 for 2 on Tokarczuk. I'm hoping this one will change it. And then, someone else posted about Flights and how much they're enjoying it. And I was like, I just messaged him. I was like, Bookstagram's so funny. Like I just saw one person talking about how they didn't like her work, and here you are, loving it. And I mentioned that you were reading Drive Your Plow because you had not yet finished it. I think you messaged me like an hour after I had this conversation that you had finished it, and that you were kind of on the fence, not really enjoying it. And he had told me that there are a number of her fans that aren't a fan of that.
Of Drive Your Plow?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And or at least they consider it kind of one of her lesser novels. So I guess I would say if there were glimmers of hope in there, I wouldn't totally hang your hat up on her yet. But again, I haven't read any of her work, so I can't really say anything beyond I've heard this. So
the pros were good enough that I would be open to reading something else by her.
Yeah.
But I just was like not clicking with this book.
Yeah, I was hoping, we went to Gibson's yesterday, I was hoping they'd have a copy of Flights so I could at least flip through and see.
Yeah.
But it looks like someone grabbed it, so.
Yeah. So anyway, that is our reading update. Let's take a look at some of the questions that we have received from all of you fine folks who support this endeavor. I've got quite a few good ones. Well, I guess we'll start from the beginning here. Probably my favorite question that we got. And this is from Medic6693 on Instagram. Oh, you know what? I forgot to make a YouTube community post because we actually got quite a few questions from there last time. My bad, guys. Okay. How to navigate a bookstore and find new books as a beginner.
Oh.
Do you want to tackle that one first or want me to go first?
Why don't you go ahead?
This is a great question. And there is quite a bit of research around the paradox of having too many choices. It can actually make you more indecisive. This is something I learned from being a business owner. When you are presenting, when you're trying to put together options for your customers, you actually don't want too many because people just get paralysis by analysis. And I do find that can happen quite a bit in a bookstore as well.
Totally.
Which is why it can be good to visit bookstores that specialize in something, whether that's history or maybe romance or whatever it is. If you know you're interested in those topics, to find those places that, most bookstores are going to have a little bit of everything, but some stores, you can tell they really focus on one type of thing.
Yeah.
So that can be good. But if you're a completely rank beginner and you have no idea what you're doing, I would just say the reason why classics are a good place to start is because they're books that have withstood the test of time for mostly good reasons. And so you can be pretty confident that you're going to get something out of the reading experience by reading a classic. And it doesn't have to be classic. I think when we say classics, a lot of us think of maybe 19th or 20th century works. It doesn't have to be that, but something that's probably at least 20 or 30 years old and is still kind of in the conversation is a good place to start.
Yeah.
Also, most people that work in bookstores are quite knowledgeable about books and reading. So asking for help is always
Definitely
a good place to start as a beginner. But I guess the real thing I would say, and this is probably going to be controversial in a sense, is try to judge books by their cover.
Absolutely.
There is an aesthetic quality, or there is part of the experience is aesthetically based. And so if a book looks visually appealing to you, it's going to put you it's going to prime your mindset for that book. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's kind of the same reason, and we've talked about this before, why like vinyl has kind of made a comeback, vinyl records, because sure, you can go on the internet and listen to anything that you want at any point in time through streaming services or even purchasing the MP3 files, but there is something that is added to the experience that makes it more overall enjoyable to have that tangible thing that has that aesthetic appeal to it. And I think that's absolutely true for books. I mean, look, if you put the same book in front of somebody, 2 copies, and one was a blank cover and one had a really cool cover design, you said, which one would you rather read? You're going to pick the one that looks nice. So, just look at book covers and see what catches your eye, pull those off the shelf and just read a little bit. And then just start with things that are short too.
Definitely.
We can all get kind of excited about reading big books because it gives you a sense of accomplishment, and everything about the big book might be cool. Like the cover looks great and the synopsis sounds great. But if you get, 100 pages into a 800 page book and you're like, ooh, not really digging this, it's like, you're just DNF it.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I would say, kind of like you said, judge the book by its cover, make some aesthetically based decisions. But also I would do a little bit of research beforehand.
Yeah, that's great advice, actually.
I've given the advice before, look up, best 100 books lists or something like that. Even if you don't necessarily do something that in depth, if you're asking the question to one of us, it's presumably you follow us on Instagram and see the books that we recommend, or probably follow other people that post book-related content. Look up some of the books that you see people on social media talking about. If you like it, make a note of it. If you don't, you could still kind of make a note, like what you're looking for or not looking for. Sometimes that's even more helpful, knowing what you don't want to read.
Yeah.
I picked up a book when we were at the store yesterday that had a really cool cover. It was an NYRB, and I just looked at the synopsis, and it didn't really seem like something I would be crazy about. So I was like, I'm just not going to get this.
Yeah.
So you do something like that, kind of make an idea of the type of book you're looking for. Or you could even just kind of just think a little bit about what you're interested in. I mean, most bookstores have like a general fiction section, and then at least at like Gibson's or Barnes and Noble, it'll be broken down a little bit further. They'll have their fiction section, and then there's a mystery and thriller section, and there's a romance section. Depending on the store, you might have other further breakdowns of that, maybe like a Western or a sci-fi or whatever, fantasy.
Yeah.
If you want to read, if you think like fantasy books are going to be your jam, then you can head straight to that section and kind of poke through. And like you said, kind of look at the covers, look at the title. Do you kind of get that gut check, like, oh, this sounds appealing. Oh, and no, I don't. It sounds kind of hokey.
Drive your plow over the bones of the dead is a great example.
Yeah.
That title sounds metal as hell. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's the one I want to read.
Or, you could carry the same thing over if you're like looking for nonfiction type stuff. If you want to read a book about U.S. history, don't hang out in the philosophy section.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That is one of the nice things about the way that nonfiction is titled, particularly these days, is the secondary title is always a very quick synopsis.
Yeah.
You know, like it'll be like the Jakarta method, the CIA's crippling of the Indonesian population, or whatever.
Right,
you know?
right.
So it gives you really clear. You don't get that with fiction, obviously.
No.
So,
but you know, I would say whether it's doing a deeper dive and coming up with like a specific list of titles that you're interested in, or just kind of a general idea of the type of book you'd like to read, doing some thinking ahead of time, just so you're not totally wandering the shelves aimlessly.
Another pro tip I would say is make sure that you're very comfortable. So if I have to pee really badly, or I'm hungry, or I'm wearing like uncomfortable shoes or something like that, I find I will rush.
Yeah.
So just make sure that, you know, you're just in a calm place.
Yeah. Get yourself a nice coffee. Take your time.
Take your time.
Yeah.
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 Especially if you're in a huge bookstore like Gibson's, which we were at yesterday for their 25% off sale. They have a bajillion books.
Yeah.
And so you got to be patient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, be patient. You know, don't worry if you strike out. If you're looking at the fiction section and you're starting with the A and working your way through the alphabet, don't worry if you haven't found a book by C yet. Like this.
Yeah. Don't feel like you have to leave the store with something. And that's another reason why a library is a good place to start too.
Yeah.
So that's a great question though. Okay. So I'm going to skip that one because we're not going to be able to have a good conversation about that.
Oh boy.
I mean, it's nothing controversial. It's top 5 Latin boom writers. I don't know. Google it. Like I'm not by any stretch of the imagination.
I've only read one of the.
Yeah. So not an expert on that one. I love this question as well. How would you recommend someone get into the habit of reading every day? I'll take this one first since this is kind of like a little bit of a thing for me. My absolute 2 best pieces of advice. Number 1, just commit to reading 1 page per day. If you can make the commitment to do that, you will become an everyday reader, because it doesn't matter how tired you are or what else you have going on, what you're stressed about. You can convince yourself to reading 1 page.
Yeah.
And the likelihood of you only reading 1 page and then stopping is pretty low. But at least if you, and look, I have done that. I've been like, I committed to 1 page, I read the 1 page, and now I have to go to sleep.
Yeah.
But you do have the sense of accomplishment that you stuck to your goal and you got into the habit of doing it every single day. The other thing I would recommend is doing it as early in the day as possible. If I read in the morning before I do anything else, I am, for whatever reason, more likely to also read more in the evening. But it is very easy for people to be like, oh, I'm going to read this afternoon after work or after the gym or whatever. And then something comes up and you get sidetracked and okay, I'll do it. And then I'll get to it a half hour later than I planned. And then something else happens. And the next thing you know, it's 10 o'clock at night and you're like, I want to go to bed. So getting it, I don't want to say getting it out of the way because it makes it sound like it's a chore and it's not. But if you just do it first thing, then again, you can really have that momentum and sense of accomplishment. Like I set this goal and I've already met my goal before I've done anything else for the day.
Totally.
So it's just an easy win.
Yeah, I would echo both of the things you just shared, in terms of trying to just hit a minimum every day, whether it's a certain page count or, for 10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
Another thing that really helped me when I got into reading and started to try and make it more of an active habit and a thing I did regularly, I kind of made my goal identity based. It really helped me mentally. And what I mean by that is I I think a lot of people set out to make their goal, like whether it's a New Year's resolution or just a new habit they want to pick up. I want to read more. And for me, I tried to make it not so much that, but I want to be a reader.
Yeah.
And that really helped me because, if you don't ever read and your New Year's resolution is to read more, and you read a book in January and then you don't pick up a book for the rest of the year, you read more than you did the year before, but you didn't really create the habit.
Right.
And, it's great. And not to like diminish, you went from reading nothing to one or two books. That is if that's your goal to read more, that's a step in the right direction. But making it the identity, like I want to be a reader, it's kind of a conscious thing. Like, I didn't read today. I'm kind of falling behind on this who I want to be type goal.
Yeah.
And it makes it a little bit easier mentally, at least for me it did, to kind of set those daily habits of like, I'm going to read 10 pages today, or I'm going to read for half an hour today. Just because it was, again, making it part of my identity.
Yeah. Yeah. I've made a ton of content around this concept, but you want to make your goal the action that creates the outcome that you want.
Right. Totally.
Your goal, if your goal is the outcome, it's just kind of nebulous. So that's like when people make their goal, I want to read 50 books or 100 books this year. Fine. That's fine. But that doesn't really do anything to help you achieve that goal. No. But if you make your goal to read every day, then that action will produce the outcome of having read 50 or more books or whatever. Obviously, there's a lot of variance and nuance there, but I think, kind of like you said, making the goal, I want to be a reader, that's an interesting one because then with that mindset, you're like, okay, well, how does a reader behave?
Absolutely. 100%. And
right.
that's where it comes from. Like, what types of things does the type of person I want to be do? Exactly.
Yeah. I think, too, going back to the, doing it earlier in the day, reading earlier in the day, one thing that really, I think why it works so well for me is that I get excited about reading. So I'll read a little bit in the morning and then I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to pick this back up later today. Mm-hmm. Where if you've waited a whole 24 hours, sometimes, again, just like your day gets away from you.
In the way, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great question. Hopefully that helps. And we support you on your journey to becoming an everyday reader. Okay, let's see what we have next here. What's the best snack or beverage while you're reading? And that comes from William R. Morgan on Instagram. I will say that I don't really enjoy snacking while I read because my fingers are going to get dirty and I don't want to get my books dirty.
Totally.
I don't want to get Cheeto dust on my books. So I tend to not eat at all while I read. For beverages, I mean, it's the Monster Energy Rehab.
Yep.
Either the strawberry lemonade or the iced tea / lemonade blend. I'm a total fiend for those. One can a day is barely enough. As soon as I finish, I start thinking about tomorrow's can. But Caffeine has
a plug. What an ad read.
I know.
Monster Energy, if you are listening,
please sponsor us.
Hook us up.
Yeah, so caffeine has been shown to help improve focus and memory and other cognitive benefits. And there's also a little bit of, I think, like a dopamine release when you participate in the habit that produces those well-being feelings. So like even before the caffeine has hit your system, just the act, like your brain associates those good feelings from caffeine with the process of having the drink. And I think, doing that in conjunction with reading kind of puts you in a good mindset to read.
Yeah.
So I would say that's my pick for a beverage.
Yeah, I would say a nice cold Monster Energy or some water.
Yeah.
I don't really snack much either for the same reason you said.
Yeah. I'm not going to sit there with like a fork.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Sometimes if I'm like, reading a short story collection and it's just kind of a couple pages or something like that, like I might read a story or two while I'm eating dinner or
Sure.
like I said, while I've been reading Borges on my lunch break. But if I'm like sitting down at the end of the day with a novel, I don't really like to eat it all.
Yeah.
For the reason you said don't want to get the book dirty, but also like it's kind of distracting.
Yes.
I read a page, I got to stop, take a bite, or I'm trying to negotiate the two activities. Kind of lose your place in the whatever page you're on, or kind of just interrupts the flow and the rhythm.
Yeah, it's a focus break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I find reading to be pretty meditative, so it is difficult to interrupt that.
I much prefer smoking because you can take a nice drag of your cigarette without turning away from the page. It really helps with the aesthetic of just a jaded,
degenerate reader,
spiteful reader.
Don't let Andy fool you. He's a staunch pink lemonade vape lover.
That's not true either.
No, neither of those things are true. These are jokes, people. So I actually have been reading standing up a little bit. I've been playing around with that or walking around my living room, which I find...
I'll do that sometimes. I'll do that. Yeah. Same thing with I was saying with the short stories while I'm eating lunch or dinner. Sometimes I'll do that or like a poetry collection or something that's really short and can kind of be digested in snippets.
Yeah.
I'll do that while I'm cooking dinner.
Yeah.
Like if it's not something where I have, I'm just kind of stirring the pot every 2 or 3 minutes.
Yep.
I'll grab the book and just kind of pace through my kitchen and living room, read a couple pages, stir the onions.
Yeah.
It's
hard to eat, stand, walk, and read all at the same time. So no snacks around here. Let's see here. What else? Aaron Zimmer on Instagram asked, would you be interested in writing your own book?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Yes. I have mixed feelings about it. I think that the two activities are obviously pretty intimately linked, but I do think it's a little bit cliche, and I'm not saying that this applies to either of us, but I do think it's a little bit cliche for like bookstagrammers to write their own stuff. I don't know. Whatever. Just maybe forget I even said that. I don't know. I just have a weird thing about it. And
I think I understand what you're trying to say, where like, like you said, some of the bookstagrammers where it's, again, we've kind of poked fun at them a little bit, where that's just really simple, kind of repeatable plots or TV in book form.
Yeah.
That I think is where it gets a little cliched, but the more I've read, there's the old saying that everyone has at least one good book in them.
I don't know if I've heard that before.
Oh,
who said that?
I have no idea.
Caleb, look it up, buddy. Sorry.
But I think I've started to appreciate or believe in that a little bit more as I've been reading. I've talked about it before, where like certain more modern books that I've read, like some Volman stuff, like some Wallace stuff, wouldn't have existed without I'm gonna do it 40 minutes in, Gravity's Rainbow or The Recognitions or things like that.
Yeah.
Where, some person reads a book that's 20, 30, 40, 100 years old, whatever, and kind of inspires that creative drive.
Yeah.
Even if the particulars aren't an influence. You know, the thematic qualities don't necessarily carry over from one book to the next, but you know, you read something by an author and it kind of goes, okay, this creative idea is a possibility.
Right.
You know, I've talked before about Cult of the Cactus Boots.
Yep.
About how that's such a crazy book and how it really kind of turns the idea of what a novel can do on its head. I think that's a great example where if someone reads a book like that and they're like, okay, I don't have to write this just kind of like straightforward narrative. I can really be playful and kind of put my own spin on a book. I can do something that's like uniquely my own and my voice and my vision and my creative ideas. I think if you get inspired by something like that, that's a little bit different than, you know, someone on Bookstagram reading an enemies to lovers romance and thinking, I'm going to write my own enemies to lovers romance. Cause then you're just kind of, that's where it gets a little cliched in my opinion.
Yeah.
And again, not to diminish anyone that has done that because, and I've talked about this before, at the end of the day, I'm just a guy that records a podcast once a week and sometimes shares stuff on Instagram.
Right.
You know, I don't even always have the creative drive to make posts for Instagram.
Yeah.
You know, if someone out there is taking the time and putting the effort into writing a book and actually is successful with that, and by successful, I mean writes a book and gets copies out there in the world, whether one person or 1,000 people read it, that's more than I've done.
Yeah.
Like, good for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, just I think seeing a project that big through all the way is
it's huge.
Big accomplishment.
That's success in and of itself.
Yeah.
Just doing the thing.
I don't know if this is true or not, but supposedly Colleen Hoover wrote her first book just to like for fun.
Yeah.
And she supposedly published it on like Amazon self-publishing like ebook just so like I think her mom or her grandmother could read it or something like that.
Yeah.
And then somehow it ended up in the hands of some huge book blogger because when blogging was still a really popular thing and that person loved it and then now she's like the best-selling author in the world.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
I shared something the other day. It was a reel or a post kind of making fun of Colleen Hoover, and it had a snippet of or a passage from one of her books, and it was just terrible. So
I mean, certainly not our
no, it was
style,
terrible. It was terrible.
But hey,
if I'll see if I can find it but if you know someone if Colleen Hoover can get published, then
well, I think it's definitely a marketing game at that level. It's not looking for the works that are pushing the boundaries of any genre. It's literally, is there market viability here?
Yeah.
And that's, you know, what drives a lot of those decisions, unfortunately. But that's how it's always been in art.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at some of the most famous paintings of all time, they were commissioned pieces by, you know, very wealthy people who some broke artist needed the money and was just like, oh, I guess I'll paint another portrait of this rich dickhead. And then they became a famous painter later on in their life. And now it's like, oh, look at how amazing this painting is. So
I found this. So let me read this before we move on to the next question.
Oh God, here we go.
Because the people need to know.
All right.
I don't think many of our listeners read a lot of Colleen Hoover.
Probably
so
not. Probably not.
I think we can all share in this good laugh.
Okay.
Thank you for this baby, she says from the back seat. He's beautiful. I laugh. You're responsible for the beautiful part, Rachel. The only thing he got from me was his balls. She laughs. She laughs hard. Oh my God, I know. They're so big. We both laugh at our son's big balls.
Not great, but again, we're not the right reader for that book. So, oof. All right. Moving on.
So,
have you seen Shaun of the Dead? That comes from Dark Zaquavius on Instagram. Yes, I have. That's a great film.
I feel like I have. It's probably been forever.
Yeah. But it was a early 2000s comedy.
It's the same guy that was in Hot Fuzz, right?
Yes. Gosh, I'm totally blanking on his name.
Yeah. I know I've seen Hot Fuzz a number of times. I've probably seen Shaun of the Dead. It's just been forever.
Let's see here. 2004, Shaun of the Dead came out, and it is starring Simon Pegg.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Great film. Hilarious. You've got red on you. That's the funny quote from that. Well, I'm sure there's many, but E Manning 70 asks, are you ever tempted to get multiple copies of a book, like or a set of multiple editions of an author's work?
Yes.
Yes.
I have 4 copies of Gravity's Rainbow. I have 4 copies of The Recognitions, 3 copies of JR, 2 copies of Cult of the Cactus Boots, 2 copies of A Bend in Circuity, 3 copies of You Bright and Risen Angels. Yeah, there's a number of books that I have multiple copies of. I don't think I have multiple copies of anything that's in translation. There's nothing that I've read so far that has had multiple translators that I want to compare the difference between the two.
Yeah.
Like there's a few different translations out there of some of Dostoevsky's work, and I've read some of his work, but nothing to the point where I'm like, oh, I want to compare this to a different translator. But yeah, I think if it's an author or a novel that you love, then it's totally cool to have multiple editions and really personalize your library that way.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you have, especially a collection of classics, there's been multiple iterations of a lot of those books throughout the years. And so you might have a really nice vintage early edition that you don't necessarily want to cart around with you or even take off the shelf that often and handle. You want to keep it in nice condition. So you might have a newer copy that's like your actual reader copy. Or, this is certainly true for me. I will have a very old, kind of bland, boring version of a book, and they'll release a new edition that has like a dope cover. And I'm like, yeah, I want that. It just looks awesome, So I think that's totally normal to have multiple copies of the same book. Let's see here.
I got a couple. We can.
Yeah, let's see what you got.
All right, I've got 2 from Seth at Waste Mailing List. So we'll start with the first one. What is a book or books that are highly regarded classics that you suspect you'll never read?
Ulysses, Finnegan's Wake, both by Joyce. I might read Ulysses. It's unlikely. I for sure will never read Finnegan's Wake. I'm just not interested.
Yeah.
And let's see what else. Those are the top 2 that come to mind. What about you?
I probably will never read anything by the Brontes or D.H. Lawrence or...
What's your beef with Lawrence?
It just
doesn't seem appealing.
It's just not anything that seems all that appealing to me. Same thing to the Bronte sisters. I'm not super interested in a lot of Jane Austen.
Yeah. Can we do just a quick tangent? We started this episode by talking about controversial videos that I've posted and how I'm still getting comments about them. I still get comments on the Buendia quote.
Of course.
And somebody said, I don't understand why someone feels so confident in claiming that something's the best in literature when they've only ever read 3% of literature. And I was like, dude, if you've read 3% of all literature, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That is so many books. I don't think you really understand how many books have been published.
I would love to read 3% of all books that have been published.
If you've read, just even if you narrowed it down to it had a strict definition of literature, I mean, you would be you would be in a great position to make a claim like this is the best of all of literature. But anyway, go on as you were saying.
You know, I wouldn't say I will never read any more Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
But I've certainly lost some of the zeal.
Yeah.
Recently. I don't have much interest in reading any Celine. I started Journey to the End of the Night.
Yeah, neither of us really like that.
And I didn't really get into it. Plus, he was a pretty serious fascist.
Yeah. Unrepentant Nazi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think with some people in their troubled past, so to speak, put it mildly, there's some cases where you can separate the art from the artist. Fascism and anti-Semitism is kind of where I draw the line.
Well, that's I want to get back to your questions, but I do think this next question segues quite well.
Okay.
Acnunems. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your username on Instagram. Would you still read works by authors like Alice Monroe and others who deserve canceling? Do you know who Alice Monroe is?
Yes.
Do you know why she deserves canceling?
I have a rough idea. It was a pretty recent story. I believe it was her. I forget her exact relation to this person. It might have been like her second husband or a romantic partner of some kind. Believe sexually assaulted Monroe's daughter.
Oh.
And Monroe didn't really do anything. Kind of knew and just was like...
Yeah, I just looked up the news article. I knew this day was going to come. Alice Monroe associates say they knew of abuse.
Yeah, so she like knew of abuse that her daughter was facing and kind of swept it under the rug. I think it kind of depends on why the person is being canceled.
Yeah.
Or it's another term that's become overused and watered down, but or facing public criticism.
Yeah.
I should say. So, I mean, for something like that, or like I was just saying about Celine, I'm all set. Not that I really ever have had any interest in reading any of the Harry Potter books in decades.
Yeah.
But, you know, J.K. Rowling's public opinions certainly dissuades me from wanting to read or engage with anything that she's associated with.
Yeah, for me, I think obviously what the controversy is about is a part of the decision to engage with these works or not. But I think a bigger factor for me is if they are still alive and if they're going to benefit in some way from me engaging with their books. So if it's somebody long dead, I'm probably going to be a little bit more open to reading it because, look, me buying their book or making a post about their book is not lining the pockets of some reprehensible scumbag. But
yeah,
I do think it's important to remember these works in their historical context and the influence that they might have had on reading culture and writing culture. Faulkner's one that doesn't get talked about a lot, but he made some really disgusting comments during the civil rights movement. Basically how like Martin Luther King Jr. was just making it worse for people of color, and his speaking out for the rights of black people was just going to make the opposition double down on their stance and make it worse, and that's just that's victim blaming.
That's not great.
It's not great, and you could argue that Faulkner, that racism that's clearly there, is not contained or expressed in his writing. But to me, I think that like writers really should be forward thinkers. That doesn't necessarily mean I have to agree with them politically, but you're talking about the civil rights movement. At that point in time, anyone with some measurable amount of empathy and critical thinking could see that racism is bad.
Yeah.
And so it was a little like, for me, that's like, you're a little too far into history, into the new world here, buddy, to still be making comments like that. And I've had some discussions with people about it, and like, well, he was from the South, and well, what do you expect? I'm like, I expect better. That's what I expect.
Yeah.
Like you can be from the South and not be racist. It's possible. And if you are simply just going to be a product of your environment, do I really care about what you have to say? Like, I don't know that I do. If that's like going to be the defining factor about you. I mean, where you're from is certainly going to not refine, but define, part of your identity. But I don't know. It was gross to me.
Yeah.
And, Faulkner's dead, so who cares? Like, yeah, I'll probably would still read some of his stuff if I, just piqued my interest again. But I don't know. Yeah, I think it's a tricky topic to navigate sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
And, does Alice Monroe deserve canceling? Like, I don't even know. Like, I would need to know more about the context of the story and what exactly happened. And she's dead, right? Like,
I think so.
Yeah.
I think she just recently passed.
Yeah. I mean, she's got to be a bajillion years old. Let's look it up. Alice Monroe. Oh, no, she's not dead.
Oh.
Okay. Anywho. So what's your next question that you have?
So this is also from Seth. What topics, perspectives, or identities do you feel are underrepresented in today's literature?
Read that again. Let me process that.
What topics, perspectives, or identities do you feel are unrepresented in today's literature?
There's a lot. As far as topics goes, I think that the negative impact of, I guess, our current economic system, that's definitely underrepresented in today's literature. I think as far as identities, there's been a strong push, obviously, to publish more diverse voices in terms of identity. So people who are LGBTQ or from another country or different ethnicities. I think that's good. I think in a way, like white guys have been kind of stereotyped, and I don't want this to sound like, oh, it's harder than ever to be a man or whatever people whine about, because that's certainly not the case. Like, we're not in a position of inferiority. So even if somebody feels that way about you as a person, it doesn't really have like any meaningful impact on your life.
Right.
But it's definitely become like it's definitely become a stereotype. Like I saw somebody post on TikTok the other day. They're like, I will never read again another book from a straight white man. Like, I don't care what they have to say. And it's like, you can absolutely make the case that white dudes have dominated what's been published over the last 150 plus years, but that doesn't mean that every story from a white guy is going to be, that's like the sole defining factor of somebody.
Right.
And look, if you don't want to read those books, it's your reading journey. Do whatever you want with it. It doesn't affect it has no negative impact on anybody, in my opinion, to make that claim even. I just think it's like, is that really what we're doing now? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I want to read stories from people who have lived very different lives than me because I'm curious about what those lives are like. But that doesn't mean that I will never read a book by someone that's like me or whatever, you know? So
I think, and I'm the same way. Like I like to try and read a broad spectrum of experiences. But for me, I think it boils down to the experience, not who had it, if that makes sense. Because, you know, like you could have someone that's a straight white guy from rural Texas who kind of had an impoverished background, maybe had an abusive family or went through some traumatic experiences in his childhood and or lifetime, could write a fantastic book, whether it's about those experiences or not. And it would be a great novel.
Yeah.
And it's a perspective I've never had.
Right.
And, you know, you're just totally discounting this person's perspective and ideas on the world just because it's a white guy.
Right.
You know, someone like William T. Vollmann. Vollmann has had a completely different life than I have and will ever have.
Yeah.
You know,
It's putting it mildly.
Putting it mildly. I mean, the guy got dysentery from hanging out in Afghanistan.
Was he in the military?
No,
Oh,
no, he was just he was over with the Mujahideen and like doing journalistic type stuff. And you know, would it be very interesting to read about what happened during that time period from the perspective of an Afghani man or woman? Absolutely. And it's not to say that something like that doesn't exist. If it was at like the top of my list, something I really wanted to experience, then I'm sure I could find something. But Vollmann's going to have a really unique perspective because he was over there trying to figure out what was going on, get a fuller picture of the situation. And a lot of his stuff kind of was in that like quasi gonzo realm of like, I'm not just going to like read sources and, you know, form an idea based off what people A and B told me. Like, I'm going to go and figure out for myself and write about it.
yeah. That's what John Steinbeck's A Russian Journal is.
Yeah.
Him and Robert Capa, the photographer, they were sick of the anti-Russian propaganda on the news during the Cold War, and they're like, let's just go there and see what it's like.
Right. So I think too, and I totally understand why people would say they want to read more from women authors or LGBTQ authors or authors from other countries or what have you, to get a more diverse and broader picture of the world and experiences of different peoples. But I think to totally just blanket, I'm not going to read anything by white men, kind of limits some of what you can take in. To circle back to Seth's question,
Yeah.
I can't. There's not really anything that jumps out off at the top of my head, but I think we're at a really interesting point in literary culture where more and more of these topics and perspectives and identities are getting representation.
Yeah.
Where, you know, we've talked about it. You know, we had Chad on the show a couple weeks ago. You and I have talked about it ourselves. I mean, books in translation, whether they're weird, heady stuff that I like or just like more kind of mainstream fiction, that whole thing is blowing up. You know, works in translation are incredibly popular right now. You're getting a lot of books written by women that are very popular right now.
Yeah.
I think if you probably looked at a lot of, really popular Bookstagram or Book Talk accounts, they're sharing books written by women. And same could be said about LGBTQ authors, whether they're writing particularly about their experiences or with that identity, or just the author happens to kind of be in that camp. And I just think the field of representation is just getting so much bigger. So
yeah, even I agree, but I still think there's a ways to go. So, I'm working on this project of trying to read one book from every country in the world, and I'm, kind of taking my time with it. But I've been compiling a lot of lists to have some options from each country, and to, if I'm doing this, I might as well make it a resource for others. And so I've been trying to come up with kind of like 4 or 5 categories for each country, which is, a nonfiction written by somebody from the country, fiction written by somebody from the country, a classic written by somebody from the country, and then a book about the country. And a lot of countries, there's just almost no fiction written by somebody from that country that's been translated in English.
right.
And or if there is, I just have not been able to find it despite scouring the internet. So I would say that's an element that still is underrepresented in literature in English.
Yeah.
So any other questions from your end?
Yeah, I got a couple more. This is from Chris Sarvis. A friend just woke up from a long coma and needs a book recommendation. What is it?
I don't know that being in a coma, really puts you in the right frame of mind for any particular type of work. I would say if, oh gosh, I don't know. I'd have to think about that for a little bit longer. Do you have anything in mind?
Just my usual smart Gravity's Rainbow.
Gravity's Rainbow.
Infinite Jest. I don't know. I think DeLillo would be good post coma reading.
I'm trying to think if I've read anything that features that as a motif.
Yeah.
But nothing is coming to mind.
Someone I saw, I forget where I saw it. Someone was talking about DeLillo and the other kind of postmodern authors of his generation that he gets, roped in a lot with. And whoever it was talking about how, Gaddis and Pynchon and Barth, Coover and all these other authors were really kind of your mainstream postmodernists, like doing a lot of the kind of stereotypical postmodern things with their works of fiction, and really kind of being experimental and playful and stuff like that. And what this person said, DeLillo was just kind of like the old man on his balcony drinking his coffee, like watching, like, what are these kids doing?
Yeah.
and still kind of writing in that vein, but kind of from like an outsider's perspective. So I think for that reason, DeLillo would kind of be
DeLillo, the official post-coma author of Life on Books podcast. This kind of touches on what we were just speaking about with Seth's question about underrepresented demographics or topics. This comes from William B. Eucheimer's Instagram. Thoughts on books and working class representation. No working class readers, in parentheses, all TV equals no books, ? So that's an interesting question. I think there are some great books that touch on working class life and do it quite well. One of my favorite books that I've read this year, and is probably as it soaks into my brain, becomes more one of my favorite books of all time, Hard Rain Falling by Don Carpenter. That is pretty explicitly what it's about, the working class.
Yeah.
Was Don Carpenter like part of that working class? I don't know enough about his life, but like probably, being a writer is never really been a super lucrative unless you're in that top 1%. I have a couple of things to say about this. Number one, I think that it probably is true that people in the working class are reading less. And I think that that's probably a factor of, in general, I think society is reading less. So the niche of reading is quite healthy, I think. But as a society, I think reading is becoming less of a common activity. And the working class is probably more affected by that because reading, it is a privilege to be literate and to have the disposable income to purchase books or even rent them on audiobook or however you do them or however you want to read. And as wages stagnate and cost of living goes up, you are forced to work harder and more, and that takes up the time you might have to dedicate to a hobby like reading. Also, your stress levels increase, which makes when your anxiety and stress increases, you're less likely to sit down and read, I think. So that's probably why maybe the working class is reading less. And again, I don't know that for a hard fact here. I'm just assuming. But to that point, I also think it's an error to assume that just because somebody is working class, that they're not interested in books or they don't read. And this is very abstract, but when I was in high school and just after high school, I played in bands quite frequently, and mostly metal or like punk, pop punk-ish, emo-ish bands. And those genres very much had an aesthetic quality to them. And the way you dressed, the way you act, the way you talked, all of that was influenced by the culture. And I never really participated in that aspect of it. So at the time, the kind of hardcore and punk bands that were popular and that we were playing with and the style associated with them was like very tight jeans with the cuffs rolled up in the bottom, long hair in your face, piercings, tattoos, that kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. Vintage type of shoes, Vans or stuff like that. And I just didn't dress like that. I just wore like kind of normal 2000s guy attire. At the time, I was a little bit more into like football and stuff like that. So I was a big Reggie White fan. He was a lineman for the Green Bay Packers. Kind of just like random. Yeah. I would wear like a Reggie White like football jersey on stage. And I remember one day that our drummer from the band I was in, he was like, Tony, I noticed that when we go to shows, everyone is dressed exactly the same except for you. He's like, you stick out like a sore thumb. And I was like, yeah, I don't know what it is about my personality, but I just don't like to be cliche. I just think it's gross and icky and it's just not for me. And if you want to be like part of the, in the culture, like I totally respect anybody that wants to do that. But I've always been that way, and that is part of the reason why I wear this hat when I make my videos, because I'm talking about works in translation or books about kind of lesser known events in history, or, you and I obviously talk about kind of obscure literature. And I just don't think that I look like the type of person you would expect to read those books. And I like to show people that anybody can read these books. You can be a bro who's into motorcycles and motorcycle racing. That's like one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
I'm a wicked gearhead, and you can still read literature. So I don't think it's necessarily 100% correct to be like, oh, working class people, that guy's a plumber, he probably doesn't read. Like, you just don't know.
Yeah.
Sure, it might be rare, but
that's really where I was at when I first got into reading books like this, because we've talked about it before. It was while I was working at the gym, and I made this joke last week or before. Like, I'm well aware of what I look like. You know, shaved head, big beard, tall, kind of built guy.
Yeah, athletic build.
A lot of tattoos. Like, I don't look like someone. I look like a meathead.
Yeah.
At least, especially at the time when I was, my whole life revolved around being in the gym, whether it was for my own training or someone else's. Like, I didn't look like the type of person that would sit down and have this kind of conversation, intellectual conversation about.
Ooh, that might be a stretch, calling this conversation intellectual, but yes, I understand.
Or try to have an intellectual conversation, just put it that way, about, hard works and literature, whether that be Pynchon or Wallace, DeLillo, authors that I talk about all the time, or, classic stuff like Dickens and Dostoevsky or whoever. And I kind of wanted, I kind of had that chip on my shoulder when I really got into it, habit of reading. Like, I wanted people to be surprised when they found out I was well read.
Yeah.
Or that was one of my goals to trying to get to this a position where I felt like I could call myself well read.
I think it is fun to kind of subvert people's presumptions,
Yeah.
And look, it's human nature to judge people at first glance and to make assumptions about people. I think that's just kind of, our brains are wired that way, probably for an evolutionary reason to help us navigate the world. But part of being a human being now and having a functioning brain is to try to let go of some of those natural habits and reactions. And so, going back to the original question about working class representation, another book that kind of comes to mind, or two books that come to mind because they are very similar, is The Good Earth by Pearl Buck and Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. I've read both those this year. They're historical fiction, so it's not necessarily modern day working class, but both of those books really, I mean, The Good Earth is quite old, but Pachinko is a very recent book that talks a lot about the working class. The same themes still apply. You and I don't read enough, I don't think, new releases to have a good finger on the pulse of whether that's a topic that's currently coming out. But that's tough. I think it is kind of not cool for dudes to be into fiction these days in general.
Yeah.
If you look at BookTube and Bookstagram and Book Talk, a lot of the fiction-based accounts are women talking about fiction broadly, but there's a lot of like romance and fantasy and romantasy and spicy, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
We overheard an interesting conversation at the bookstore about a book club that covers those. And then for dudes, it's like the self-help, self-improvement. But even, I think, for guys that read fiction, in that subgenre or subset of creators, there's still kind of like a very well-defined like type of book that's not necessarily like, I just don't know if there's that many guys posting about women in translation month,
Right.
And I think it's kind of been, for whatever reason, kind of been considered like not masculine or manly, which I will do what I can in the fight against that idea. But back in the day, like, especially kind of early 1900s, being a writer was like a badass thing. And like writers were kind of like rock stars, you know, like your Hemingways and your F. Scott Fitzgeralds. Those dudes were like badass.
Yeah.
You know, they got the ladies. They, you know, people wanted. We were obsessed with them.
Right.
So yeah, I think I don't know if you have a recommendation for a modern work of literature that tackles the working class and would be a good fit for someone that is in the working class. Drop it below.
Please do.
Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I got one more.
Yeah, hit
this
us.
is from the Ghastly Fop.
Ah, yes, our good friend.
Which character from a book would you have a beer with? One you would avoid at all costs.
So many to choose from. Well, as far as avoiding, I would probably avoid Jack from Hard Rain Falling. It just seems like a dangerous guy to be around.
That would just end poorly, probably.
Who would I want to have a beer with? Ooh, that's a great question. Probably Sidney Carton from Tale of Two Cities. He was a drinker, so there's that.
Yeah.
And I think would be interesting to pick his brain about some stuff.
Yeah.
What about you?
You know, for someone that likes to think he's well read, I seem to just go back to the same old reserve on this one. The first one that jumps out to mind would have to be Tyrone Slothrop from Gravity's Rainbow.
Yeah.
I just feel like he'd be just a total trip, like just shenanigans everywhere.
Yeah.
If you have a beer with him, you know, 1 minute you're sitting down having a beer, and then the next you're smuggling hash through war-torn Europe. It seems like I'd end up on an adventure with that one.
Who would you avoid?
That's a tough one. Just going off of looking at the stack of books next to us, I probably would not want to have a drink with William Kohler, the protagonist of The Tunnel.
Oh, okay. Which I have not yet read.
He's
but
a pretty spiteful guy, and would probably be a pretty depressing drunk.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I think I'm good on that. I think I'd go for the Slothropian adventure versus Kohler's negativity.
I'm trying to find Seth's question from last time we did a Q&A that we didn't get to it.
Oh boy.
I don't know where it is though. It was Fuck, Marry, Kill. I forget what the three things were though. It was like 3 books, I think.
It was independent publishers.
Oh, right.
It was, I know Deep Vellum was one of them. I think Open Letter was another one, and I forget what the third was.
Yeah, that's an impossible question, Seth.
Yeah. How could you do that to us, Seth?
So we do have a few more great questions here, but I think I'll save them for next time just because we are an hour and a half in. Thank you to everyone for the great questions. I hope you enjoyed the discussion about books and reading. Is there anything else you want to address before we sign off here?
Yeah. Going back to, you kind of brought it up. We heard this discussion going on when we were in the bookstore yesterday.
Oh, yep.
Bookstores aren't the same as the library. There's not the rule about being quiet, but have a little bit of decorum and some respect for people that are trying to quietly peruse the bookshelves and pick out books that they would enjoy and want to bring home, and kindly shut the fuck up.
Yeah, there was quite a loud discussion going on about
multiple loud discussions going on
about the very interesting choice of books for a particular book club. But hey, they were having a good time, so it is what it is. Yeah. No, I agree. It is just kind of hard to think sometimes when you're looking for a particular book or a publisher or.
I'm trying to flip through the book and get a sample of it and see if I'd enjoy it, and I can't focus because there's a nonsensical cacophony of stupidity going on 10 feet from me.
Brutal. All right. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely of the individual saying them at any given time. So, yeah.
Have fun hosting this by yourself next week.
Yeah. No, I agree. You know, it's I'm super glad that people are coming together around books, but yeah, just have a little I would say forget decorum and just, you know, respect for the people around you. It was positioned in quite a way that made it difficult to reach certain sections of the bookstore, and it was very interesting. So going back to the question about how to navigate.
It's kind of like when you're at the grocery store.
Right.
Don't park your cart right in front of the entire meat section so that you block other people from getting the cut of steak that they want.
Correct.
Or the chicken that they want or whatever.
Yeah.
Same thing on the bookstore. Just take like a step or two back.
Yep.
You can still see the whole shelf.
Yeah. Give people the space to
And other people
navigate.
can look at the shelf too.
Yep.
They can reach the book they want to reach.
We'll have to do a whole episode on bookstore etiquette. Put things back where you got them. That's a good one.
Or, you know, have some awareness so that if you're right up against the bookshelf and someone next to you is trying to get to a book that's about your hip level, just like take a step to the side.
Yeah,
Get out of the way.
That's a good one for the question about navigating bookstores as a beginner. Just, you know, can be considerate of the people around you. Be considerate of the store and making sure you're handling the books with care and putting them back, you know, where you got them from in alphabetical order.
And if you don't know where you got them from, give them to someone at the store.
Yeah. So that
most stores also will have like a section.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. If you pull something off the shelf and you can't get it back because it was hard to reach, or you're not exactly sure where it went, where it came from, just bring it to the front, or if they have a designated area. So bookstore etiquette, that'll be next week's topic. All right. We'll see. Well, you'll see us next time.
Bye-bye.